My mother's cabin sits beside a pond in New Hampshire. The pond is a wide and shallow body of water, but in some ways it functions as a stream, flowing from the northeast area where the beavers live down to the southwest corner where there's a small dam. And then you can generally predict where the borders of the pond are. Each year the shape of the marshy areas within it changes. And when my parents first bought their home there 24 years ago, you could kayak across the pond to the left of the small, like, one-house island that's on that side. And I would always slow down when I got there to watch the shiny turtles sunning themselves on the rock that peek up out of the water, on my way to catch a glimpse, if I could, of the hidden loon nest from a distance that wouldn't disturb the mama and the papa loon. I would kayak across the lake and through the water lilies every day. But as the years have gone on, the pickerel weed and the spatterdock and the water lilies that have all grown in that marshy area have grown so dense between the island and the dam that now that pathway is cut off. And you have to paddle all the way around the other side of the island if you want to try to catch a glimpse of the loon nest. I resisted this marsh at first between the island and the dam. The first couple of years that it was filling in, I would paddle hard through that vegetation anyway, leaving a torn trail of lily pads in my wake, digging my paddle hard into the muck to try to propel myself forward when my kayak did not have enough free water to float through. Anyone ever feel like they're doing that metaphorically or realistically? It's like it doesn't want you to go, but you're gonna make it go. Eventually, I felt guilty about the water lily carnage that I was leaving in my wake, and I tried to let it go. I accepted that the old way through was gone. And though it filled in many years ago, I still miss this old path to the loon nest, and every year when I go and visit my mother, I check to see if it might have opened again. But the deeper truth that I know is that while the pond will keep changing forever, the old way is gone and it will not come back. Mother scientist, decorated professor, and enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer, would remind me to listen to the teachings of these buoyant and beautiful water lilies when I am irritated that they tangle around me and keep me stuck when I want to go down my old path. In Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teachings of Plants, she writes about the ways that water lilies breathe. Because though the only part we really see of the water lily are the vibrantly green heart-shaped pads and those creamy, perfect flowers sitting atop the water like a Monet painting, each leaf and flower are connected to the bottom of the pond through a long stalk that leads down to a thick rhizome or root who is buried in its mucky depths. The water lilies are rooted in darkness and they are floating in light. So the science of this, it's taken me a little bit to understand the full science of what Dr. Kimmerer is saying, but basically all plants primarily take in carbon dioxide and water and then breathe back out oxygen into the air. The roots of plants, whether we're talking about trees or tomato plants, even plants in the water, the roots need oxygen to be able to breathe, to survive. But unlike the spaces in the soil on land that hold enough oxygen for tree roots, for example, to survive, the muck at the bottom of a pond doesn't. It has no oxygen. Kimmerer writes that scientists used to think that the movement of oxygen from up at the surface of the lilies down to the roots was merely a slow process of diffusion. In other words, that oxygen would slowly make its way down from cell to cell just because there was more oxygen up here and less down here, and that's how energy and matter works. But more recently, they discovered that water lilies breathe underwater in a different way. The newer, younger leaves have tightly packed air spaces in them as they grow, as they develop. And that creates a higher pressure area in the plant. The older leaves, and I'm trying to figure out in this metaphor whether I'm an old leaf or a young leaf. I think I'm like leaning older leaf now, but place yourself wherever you are in the metaphor. And it's not just age. The older leaves, with their looser spaces created by the tatters and tears that open the leaf through sun and wind and kayak paddles, the old leaves create a lower pressure region where oxygen can be released into the atmosphere. And so this pressure difference between the young, tightly spaced cells and the young leaves and the older leaves that are sort of tattered and have some tears in them, it creates a pull in the air that is taken in by the young leaf. So air comes down, these air-filled capillary networks from the young leaves down into the roots and then back up the older leaves and back out into the atmosphere. The oxygen moves from young to old, passing through and feeding the root in the process. The young and the old are linked in one long breath, a breathing in that also calls for a breathing out, nourishing the common root from which they both arose. New leaf to old, old to new. Rooted in darkness and floating up in light, water lilies must breathe underwater if they are to survive. The tattered old leaves and the shiny new ones, the perfect white and yellow cups of their flower and the muddy, stringy underwater tangle are all connected, all grounded in the depths of the pond through their common root system. They don't simply come into being and grow old and die like some plants. They rely on the parts of them that are old and the parts of them that are new to bring life to the root that gave life to them. Ever-changing, ever alive, messy and immaculate. Water lilies use all that they are to breathe water underwater and release oxygen into the air. So my friends, we are at a point in human history where so many of our old paths, our old ways of doing things are no longer open to us, right? COVID and climate change and all that feels catastrophic in this world, and also all that feels incredible and life-giving and new about this world are tangled around us in this moment. And we can no longer dig in our paddles harder and just try to push ourselves forward through the way we used to go, because we can't leave that wreckage behind us. This is the time for us to listen to the teachings of the water lilies, to listen to the teachings of all plants and each other. This is the time for us to know that our messy, muddy roots ground us in the darkness that is far beneath us. And there's a role to play both for the old and for the new parts of us floating up in the light, that all of us has a part to play in working together to survive. This is a time for us to find new ways of being, carrying with us the lessons of the gifts of what has come before. I can't paddle through that marshy area that has been thickly settled by those water lilies and the other plants that know the secret of breathing underwater. They figured it out. I have not yet figured it out. But though the human path is closed off to me in my mom's pond, the creatures who love the wetlands are thriving there. There are great blue herons and osprey there. The turtles love it. There are river otters there, bass who find shelter and safety under those leaves. And now I have a new path if I want to catch a glimpse of that loon nest. And loons are like royals on this pond. there's like not much else happening, so like people just talk to each other about what the loons are doing. They're just like two ducks who live on the pond, but it's like the talk of the pond. And if I want to go see those royals, I can't go this simple shortcut around the island. I have to go all the way around the island on the other side. But in doing that, I pass by this stretch of wild blueberry bushes that overhang the water. And so in finding this new path, if I choose to take my time, I'm rewarded with all of the sweet, plump blueberries that I can eat, cluster upon cluster, releasing into my hand as I let myself drift slowly underneath. When it feels like we are stuck with no path open to us, my friends, may we find a new way to revel in the sweetness of the fruits that line whatever new path we have found. When it feels like we are drowning in a world that has gotten too overwhelming, may we learn from the lessons of the water lilies and find a new way to breathe underwater. And through it all, my friends, may we look around us, always look around us, and remember that we are not alone. May it be so, and amen.
Hi, I'm Reverend Hannah Capaldi.
And I'm Reverend Abbey Tennis. We are the ministers at the First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia, where our mission is to awaken love and justice in our lives and in the world.
We're so grateful that you watched, and we hope that the sermon connected with your soul.
We also want to invite you to join us for a live worship service every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. You can always find the link to that service on our website at www.philauu.org. In these services, you'll hear words like you've just heard, and you also get a chance to greet one another, pray together, sing together, and we even hold a virtual coffee hour after services to get a chance to greet some new and old friends.
If you want to support the mission of this community and you feel moved to give, you can do so by going to the website that Reverend Abbey just mentioned. You can find that link below, or you can text 215-709-5095 and follow the prompts to give.
If someone in your life needs to hear these words today, we encourage you to share this video. And again, thank you so much for watching.
We hope to see you soon.